Chapter 1. Strife between Buddhism and Brahmanism. Our journey begins with the revolutionary teachings of Lord Buddha, which once dominated the religious landscape of India. However, a counter-revolution led to the resurgence of Brahmanism and the decline of Buddhism. The Buddhist monks were either killed or compelled to migrate, taking their religious literature with them. The lay Buddhists were converted to the Hindu fold, and Buddhist texts became scarce. Despite this, many Buddhist doctrines, customs, and practices remained among the masses in a distorted form. Most importantly, many of the Buddhist places of worship, including temples, monasteries, and shrines, were appropriated by the Brahmins and converted for Brahmanic use. Scholars have shown that several famous Hindu shrines, including the Lord Jagannatha of Puri, Lord of Bhadrakeshwara, and Vithoba at Pandharpur in Maharashtra, were once Buddhist. The influence of Buddhism on Hinduism is profound. Swami Vivekananda noted that modern Hinduism is largely Pauranika, that is, post-Buddhistic in origin. He pointed out that Buddhism was mainly responsible for stopping or lessening the customs of drinking wine and killing living animals for sacrifice or for food in India. He rightly traced the origin of Hindu images and temples to Buddhist models. The practice of visiting holy places, or Tirthas, possibly originated with the Buddhists. In the Vedic texts, a Tirtha was understood to mean a place where animal sacrifices were performed. But in the epics and Puranas, which teach the cult of Tirthayatra or pilgrimage, killing of animals in sacrifice in holy place is prohibited. The worship of Buddha was started with the emergence of Mahayana. After the death of Buddha, his followers started setting up the images of the Buddha and building stupas. The Brahmins followed it. They, in their turn, built temples and installed in the images of Shiva, Vishnu, and Rama and Krishna etc., all with the object of drawing away the crowd that was attracted by the image worship of Buddha. Chapter 2. Some examples of Brahmanic usurpation. The archaeological remains of Buddhism speak volumes about the glory of Buddhism in ancient times. Shakyamuni Buddha, the founder of Buddhism, had a profound impact on the civilization of India. Buddhism was a major faith and a tremendous fountainhead of human culture in its homeland. However, many Buddhist monuments were taken up for Brahmanical use. This happened across all areas of India. For instance, in Andhra Pradesh, where Tirupati is situated, it is an accepted fact that many shrines of Buddha were converted for Brahmanical worship. In the Andhra country, where Buddhism had flourished in great strength in the early centuries of the Christian era, there came about a strong Hindu revival. Many Buddhist shrines and viharas were turned to Hindu uses. At Teres in Sholapur district and Chezrala in the Krishna district, Buddhist chaitya halls built in bricks, perhaps in the 5th century AD, survive to this day because they were appropriated to Brahmanical uses after the decline of Buddhism. The Durga temple at Aihole was another experiment seeking to adapt the Buddhist chaitya to a Brahmanical temple. The Ananthasainagudi cave temple at Undavalli was originally for a Buddhist dedication. Cave number 15 of Ellora, known as Dasvatara, was originally a Buddhist vihara. The images of Buddha, although chiseled off with care from many a niche, may still be noticed in some places. Even today, images of Buddha are worshipped as Shiva or Vishnu in many places in Bengal. One of the centers founded by Samkara was located in Puri in Odisha. According to Swami Vivekananda, the temple of Jagannatha is an old Buddhistic temple. We took this and others over and re-Hinduist them. The temple of Badrinarayan was erected by Adi Shankaracharya in about the 9th century AD. He secured the image which was lost, by diving deep in the Narda Kunda. A Buddha image is worshipped near Delhi in the name of Buddho Mata. There are two beautiful images of Buddha near Nalanda. One is popular as Telia Baba and the other as Dhelia Baba. Finally, it is noteworthy that Buddhist places were regularized as Hindu temples by writing Puranas. Not only the Buddhist holy places and shrines were occupied and transformed into Hindu tirthas and devalayas, but the best elements of Buddhistic culture, including the Buddha, were appropriated and homologized in sacred books. Chapter 3. Jagannatha of Puri is Buddhist. Welcome to our exploration of the Jagannatha temple of Puri. Swami Vivekananda once suggested that this temple was originally a Buddhist temple. This view has been reviewed in detail by Dr. Bhav Lokhande. According to poet Manohar Das, Buddha is Arjuna and Krishna is the supreme universal soul. Interestingly, Buddha was also referred to as Hari. Dr. Jadunath Sarkar quotes a poem where Jagannatha himself declares, "I am an incarnation of Buddha, I will give salvation to beings in Kali Yuga." Nagendranath Basu suggests that Buddha Swami of Alekhlila can be considered a Dhyani Buddha and Jagannatha as Bodhisattva or Padmapani. He believes that the image of Lord Jagannatha was originally a Buddha image. Behind the Jagannath temple at Puri, there is a large stone image of Lord Buddha in Bhumisparsha Mudra. This image, which could have revealed much about ancient Indian history, is now hidden behind a large wall. This wall was likely erected so that the image of Buddha would not be visible to the people. The Ratha Yatra at Puri of Jagannatha, Balaram, and Subhadra is considered a transformation of the Ratha Yatra of Buddha surrounded by Bodhisattva. This yatra was witnessed by the Chinese pilgrim Fa He in the 5th century AD. There is a legend that Lord Jagannatha was a deity worshipped by a tribal chief secretly in a cave. Later this deity was to be interned in a wooden image. These images are buried and new images installed from time to time, but the Navipadma of Sri Jagannatha is transferred from the old to the new images. It is believed by historians that it contains the tooth of the Buddha. It is well known that Buddhists never believed in caste, and those castes, who in the Hindu system of Varnas are considered to be very low, are also treated on equal terms by the Buddhists. It is therefore clear that those places of worship where respect and honor given to low caste people is comparatively better should be considered as old Buddhist shrines. Such is the case of the temple of Lord Jagannatha of Puri. Lastly, Professor T. A. Gopinatha Rao observed that the temple of Jagannatha is believed to have belonged to the Buddhists at one time and to have been converted into a Vishnu temple at a later date. The image of Jagannatha is an ill-shaped log of wood with two big eyes marked on it rather prominently. Once in 12 years, the log is renewed, the log being brought mysteriously from some unknown land. This is utilized for carving a new image of Jagannatha, in which some ancient relic is considered to be embedded. This relic is believed by some to be a relic of Buddha. Chapter 4. Vitthala of Pandharpur is Buddha. Welcome to our exploration of the deity Vitthala of Pandharpur. This deity, also known as Vithoba or Panduranga, is said to be self-manifested and is a central figure in the religious and spiritual activities of Maharashtra's saint poets of the Middle Ages. The role of these saint poets in preparing the mental state of Maharashtra for the establishment of Maratha rule by Shivaji is universally accepted to be very important. Even today, Vitthala is an important deity worshipped by all castes, low and high, and is a source of inspiration to a vast section of society. There is a deep-rooted tradition in Maharashtra that Vithoba of Pandharpur is none other than Buddha. This belief is so ingrained that in our childhood, the book of numbers and alphabets used to depict the ninth avatar of God as Buddha, and the picture of Buddha shown was that of Vithoba of Pandharpur. Dr. Bhav Lokhande has summarized the literary evidences showing that all the saints of the Middle Ages considered Vitthala as Buddha and none else. Saint Eknatha, while considering Vitthala as Buddha, says, "O Vitthala, seeing people madly involved in wealth and women, you Vitthala have taken the form of Buddha, and keeping your hands on waist and observing silence, station yourself on the brick as the ninth avatar." The views of Dr. Ambedkar that Vitthala is none other than Buddha are well known. He had started writing a book on this subject. Unfortunately, the book could not go beyond a few pages. The views of Sri A.R. Kulkarni are also well known. He has reviewed the saint poets' literature and derived conclusions similar to those of Bhav Lokhande. Kulkarni also mentions that there are images of Dhyani Buddha on the stone pillars in the hall of the temple. In conclusion, the deity Vitthala of Pandharpur is deeply rooted in the history and culture of Maharashtra. The belief that Vitthala is Buddha is a testament to the enduring influence of Buddhism in the region. This religion of saint poets is a new incarnation of Buddhism in the cultural life of Maharashtra. This is the Mahan Yugantra, the great change of era. Chapter 5. Lord Ayyappa is Buddhist. Welcome to our exploration of the deity Lord Ayyappa of Kerala. This deity, also known as Dharmasastha, is believed to have originally been a Buddhist shrine. Buddhism held sway in ancient Kerala during the reign of Asoka in the 3rd century BC. Many prominent Hindu temples of today, including the famous Ayyappa shrine atop Sabrimala, are believed to have been Buddhist shrines at one time. Lord Ayyappa is generally and popularly known as Dharmasastha. The word dharma is deeply rooted in Buddhist literature, and sastha is a well-known epithet applied to Buddha. Even today, Buddha is referred to as sastha in daily prayer of Buddhists. The present nature of the Lord is considered to be a son of Shiva and Vishnu. The story is that Shiva was captivated by the charms of Mohini, in which form Vishnu appeared at the time of churning of the ocean of milk. Shiva succumbed to the beauty of Mohini, and Sastha is believed to have been born out of the union. Another notable feature is the caste barriers are comparatively weak in this temple, which is a common feature of all those shrines which were previously of Buddhist faith. This became necessary for the Brahmins to concede to, so that masses could be wooed away from Buddhism. About references in ancient literature, T. A. Gopinath Rao observes that this deity, which is very peculiar to the Dravida country, does not appear to have been known to the region north of Godavari. In no early Sanskrit work is the deity mentioned. Even the dictionaries do not record this name and give its origin. In conclusion, the deity Lord Ayyappa of Kerala is deeply rooted in the history and culture of Kerala. The belief that Ayyappa is Buddha is a testament to the enduring influence of Buddhism in the region. Chapter 6. Draksharama is Buddhist. Welcome to our exploration of the historical and religious significance of Draksharama, a place situated in the East Godavari district of Andhra. This place is renowned for the temple of Bhimeswaraswamy, which is believed to have originally been a Buddhist shrine. The name Draksharama is said to be a corrupted form of Daksha Arma or the garden of Daksha Prajapati. The word Arma is a well-known Buddhist term applied to abodes of Buddhist bhikshu. The story of Daksha Prajapati's yajna, associated with this place, shows an anti-yajna and anti-chaturvarn spirit, suggesting that it was a Buddhist site. Interestingly, Draksharama is also sacred to Muslims. There is a tomb of a Muslim saint, Syed Shah Bhaji Aulia, with a mosque attached to it. The supporters of these Muslim saints were people of lower castes, who were originally Buddhists, suggesting that the area was predominantly Buddhist in olden times. Archaeological evidence suggests that the temple was originally a Buddha chaitya and was converted into a Hindu temple during the revival of Hindu worship. The Mula Virat or the Linga is said to be one of the Ayyappa stambas of the original Buddha chaitya. These Ayyappa stambas, which are 5 in number, represent the 5 major incidents in the life of Lord Buddha. Draksharama and other places like Amrarma in Guntur district developed as Aramakshetras, with vast temple complexes for Shiva raised by Bhimai, the eastern Chalukyan monarch. An unusually tall linga was consecrated in the sanctum, which is believed to have been shaped from a Buddhist pillar. In conclusion, the historical and religious significance of Draksharama is deeply rooted in Buddhism, and its transformation over time reflects the cultural shifts in the region. Chapter 7. Srisailam is Buddhist. Welcome to our exploration of the historical and religious significance of Srisailam, a place nestled in the dense forests of the Nallamlai hills. This place, also known as Srisailam, is revered by both Hindus and Buddhists. Srisailam is associated with various legends. One such legend involves a cow that gave all its milk to a stone, which was later enshrined in a temple by divine order. Similar legends are attached to many other temples, including Tirupati. Another legend prevalent among the Chenchu tribes, who inhabit this part of the hills, tells of Lord Shiva coming to Srisailam on a hunting expedition. He fell in love with a beautiful Chenchu woman, whom he married. Even today, Lord Mallikarjun is known among these tribes as Chenchu Malliya. This tribal legend is beautifully depicted in a bas-relief on the prakara of the temple. Srisailam can be traced back to the Buddhist period and perhaps even earlier than to the Mahayana school of Buddhism, which flourished during the 1st century AD. After the decline of Buddhism, the Hindu religion re-established its authority, probably due to the efforts of Adisankara. Srisailam, a seat of Hinduism, is now counted as one of the sacred kshetras with an important seat for Sakti in the name of Madhavi, which later came to be called as Brahmarambha. The main festivals of the temple last from February to the end of May. During this period, the temple is under the management of Pushpagiri Math of Kudappa district. On other days, the management is left to a Jangam priest assisted by the local Chenchus. The Chenchus take a leading part in the festivals both before and after Shivaratri. All this information is sufficient to link up the temple with the tribal population. The important point to note is that all these Tirvanbiales belonged to the Buddhist faith. The mere fact that these shrines had to be destroyed with sword and fire for establishing Brahman supremacy over Buddhism gives ample evidence that these tribal people practiced the Buddhist faith, and the shrines were their centers not only of worship but also of life. Now we would concentrate on Srisailam and observe what the scholars have to say about Nagarjunkonada as well as Srisailam. Professor Bhagwan, on the authority of Longest, has observed that under Shankaracharya's supervision, the Buddhist, their statues and monument at Nagarjunakonda were destroyed. This same Brahman pontiff, who resides at Pushpagiri in the Guntur district, also owns the Srisailam temple in the Nalamalais, which no doubt was acquired in the same manner as it seems to have been a Buddhist site originally. In conclusion, the historical and religious significance of Srisailam is deeply rooted in Buddhism, and its transformation over time reflects the cultural shifts in the region. Chapter 8. Traditional Story of Lord of Tirumalai. Welcome to our exploration of the traditional story of Lord of Tirumalai. Many Puranas, including the Varha Purana and Bhavishyotar Purana, contain references to Tirumalai. These legends explain why the hill has various names like Vrishbhachala, Anjanachala, Sheshahala, and Venkatachala. According to the legends, Lord Srinivasa manifested himself in a celestial Vimanam on the Swami Pushkarni located on the Lord's Kridadri or Sheschalam. This manifestation was in the Yuga of the Sweta Varha Kalpa. In this age, Brahma was the first to worship the Lord, who then became an idol assuming the Archavatara in Kali Yuga. This idol was discovered in an anthill by one Tandiman with the assistance of one Rangadasa and was first worshipped by the sage Vaknasa. The story goes on to narrate how Lord Srinivasa fell in love with Padmavati, a beautiful damsel he met one day. Through the mediation of his mother Vakula Devi, their marriage was arranged. The marriage was solemnized with great pomp and grandeur with the money borrowed from Kuber on the understanding that the debt would be repaid in 1,000 years. Interestingly, some years after the marriage, a war ensued between Vasudhana and Tondaman over the issue of sharing the kingdom. Srinivasa gave away his chakra and sankha to Tondaman and joined in person to fight for Vasudhana. After the war, Srinivasa asked Tondaman to build a temple for him, which Tondaman did. It is claimed that this Raja Tondaman, who is said to have built the temple for the Lord, was a historical person. His time was in Kali Yuga, when the Yuga had advanced sufficiently to have given occasion to the institution of the era which now goes by the name of Vikramaditya. This would mean a period of time between 57 or 1958 BC and 78 AD. Chapter 9. Self-Manifested Murthi. Welcome to our exploration of the concept of self-manifested Murthis. It's a paradox that many people, both educated and uneducated, believe that Murthis can manifest themselves, i.e., they appear without being made by human hands. This belief is not only a harmless personal superstition, but is also used by a few elites to obscure any inquiry or intelligent interchange of ideas. The scholars dealing with the subject of Tirupati have taken refuge under this theory of self-manifestation to explain away historical facts. For example, why one need not discuss the attributes of Murthi, why there are no Parivar Devtas, why the Murthi does not conform to the agamic rules, why there was no regular worship in this temple until 966 AD, and why the various Murthis are not recognized in this temple by their agamic names. In the context of Lord of Tirumalai, self-manifested should only mean that the Murthi existed. It was there. It was abandoned by its devotees, or there were no devotees left to care for it. It was uncared for, it was unworshipped, it was friendless, it was lying in a state of bad preservation for a length of time, such a length of time that it got buried in an anthill. In addition to this device of so-called self-manifestation, Brahmins have resorted to use another device to appropriate Buddhist shrines, temples, mathas, and viharas. That is Pandav's device. Any cave, any old temple, any old structure which is found deserted, Brahmins have christened it, rather crudely, in the name of Pandavs. Another device is to declare that God Muni in Kali Yuga, i.e., God observes silence in the present Kali era. This is a clever instrument to keep the masses away from the doctrine, at the same time glorify the master as a guru, which could have been very useful in those early days of conversion from Buddhism to Brahmanism. Chapter 10. Vishnu Worship. Welcome to our exploration of the history of Vishnu worship in India. The origin of Lord of Tirumalai as a Vishnu is deeply rooted in the origin of Vishnu worship in India. The Satpatha Brahmana and Taitreya Aranyaka narrate a story which tries to explain the attainment of supreme Godhead by Vishnu, who from being one of the many Vedic deities had been raised to this position in these texts. The earliest invocation to Vishnu occurs in a Sanskrit inscription of 404 AD discovered at Mansar in Gwalior district. The earliest extant representation of Sheshai Vishnu is from a 5th century brick temple at Bhitargav in Kanpur district. In the reign of Vikramaditya, the 5th monarch of the Gupta line, Bor Vishnu was sculptured in the cave at Udaygiri near Bhilsa and Bhopal in MP. Later Vijayanagar monarchs in the 14-16th centuries adopted Varha form, adoption being so complete that their coins were called Varhas. The form of Vishnu which was popular in these early days was not in standing position, but in the Sheshai form. This was the most popular representation of Vishnu, and Lakshmi as his consort was present only in this form till much later, till the period of Ramanuj. There were many Vishnu shrines in South India but Tirumalai was not amongst them. It is clear that though many centers of Vishnu worship are mentioned, there is no mention of Vengadam. The first reason suggested is that the practice of inscriptions had not yet become common. The second reason given is that, being an area under frontier disputes, no important person could visit. It was not mentioned in Itihasas meaning Ramayana and Mahabharata, neither in Vishnu Puranas nor even in the Bhagavad Purana. Many Brahmanic shrines just nearby Tirumalai are mentioned in inscriptions. Then why not Tirumalai? It would seem that though sacred, the temple was not important to Hindus as compared to temples mentioned in the inscriptions. That raises another question. When Vengadam was famous for festivals in Sangam age, how did it lose its fame and why was it not important till about 10th century AD, till Bhoga Srinivasa was installed? The most satisfactory explanation is that it was not important as a Vishnu shrine, simply because it was a Buddhist temple and could become important as a Vishnu shrine only after the idea of Buddha being an avatara of Vishnu caught the imagination of masses, after the decline of Buddhism and after the fall of Kalabhras. Chapter 11. Hindu Shilpa Shastra on Vishnu Images. Welcome to our exploration of Hindu Shilpa Shastra on Vishnu images. Today, we delve into the principles laid down by the Agamas and other texts on how Vishnu images were ordained to be made. Vishnu images are generally shown in one of three poses: sthanaka, standing, asana, sitting, and sayana, reclining. The Agama Sastras such as the Vaknasa Agama, the Pancharatra Agama, the Tantrasara and Vishnu Dharmottaram lay down these principles. There are four important types of Vishnu images, namely Yoga, Bhoga, Veera and Abhicharika types. Vishnu images usually have four arms, holding the chakra, sankha or conch, the bow and arrows, and the gada or club. The hands are usually in the Abhya, Varada, and Katyavlambita poses. Vishnu images carry several ornaments such as the Padma or the lotus, Kirita or the crown, Makra Kundalas or crocodile ear ornaments around the waist, Kati Bandhas or ornaments around the waist and hips, and the sacred thread. There is usually a mole on the right chest called Srivatsa and a garland reaching up to the knees called the Vajantimala. Shri Kaustubam is a gem-studded jewel on the chest which is sacred to Lakshmi. The consort of the Lord is usually carved or exhibited near the Srivatsa and the Shri Kaustubam. The Lord's image at Tirumalai is a sthanaka or standing figure. The worship in the Sri Venkateswara temple at Tirumalai follows the Vaknasa Agama. According to Mariach Sanhita, Vishnu images in sthanaka pose can be Yoga, Bhoga, Veera or Abhicharika Murthis. In each type, there would be three subtypes, namely then Uttama, Madhyama and Adhma Murthis. The Lord's image is in sthanaka or standing pose. The Lord is standing on a high lotus pedestal. The height of the Lord has never been recorded, but cannot be less than 9 feet from the tip of the mukutam, i.e., the crown, to the bottom of the lotus pedestal. The image is perfection personified, and it would not be incorrect to say is the most handsome and perfectly featured idol of India. According to tradition, the idol is a manifestation of the Lord in Saligram Sila. The idol of the Lord is liberally anointed frequently with civet or punugu oil. This application of oil makes the idol dark in color and does not enable us to make an accurate assessment of the material of the image. The material of the idol could be granite or the red igneous rock. The Lord's majestic beauty is best seen at the time of the Friday Abhishekam, when the jewels and other paraphernalia do not cover our view of him in his celestial glory. It is at this time that we see the eyes of the Lord in the Samadrishti pose showering divine grace. The eyes neither look up nor downwards, but straight into devotees' eyes. The face is beaming with joy and wears a smile. An aura of meditation and abundant love is the constant atmosphere around the Lord, wearing a mukuta or crown which is more than 20 inches high. The Lord's figure is richly adorned with flowing locks of hair or jata juta, and some of these locks of curly hair rest on his shoulders. The nose is delicately carved and is neither prominent nor flat. The mouth of the Lord is also exquisitely shaped. According to Pratima Mana Lakshanam, the mouth should be made slightly smiling, pleasant and possessed of all good signs. One should absolutely avoid the construction of the mouth which is passionate, impetuous, wrathful, sour, bitter, or circular. The chin and the ears are carved proportionately. The ears wear beautiful ear ornaments. The chest of the Lord is magnificent in cut and size and should, if measured, be between 36 to 40 inches in width, while the waist would be between 24 to 27 inches. The neck is conch-like and the body in the posture of a lion and exquisitely shaped. The belly is also beautifully modeled. The Lord's image has 4 arms, the upper two being carved to hold the chakram and the conch. The chakram and the conch are not integral parts of the main idol. The upper right arm holds the Sudarshana chakra, the upper left arm holds the Panchajani. The lower right hand of the Lord is in the Vardahasta pose, while the lower left hand is in the Katyavlambita pose. Actually, the fingers of the left hand rest on the left thigh, with the thumb of the hand almost parallel to the waistline. While the idol itself is not exactly standing in the Tribhang pose, as in the case of Sri Rama idols, the near and below the waist has taken a slight tilt to the left and the knees themselves are bent and open slightly outwards, giving the idol's peculiar grace and charm. Mother Lakshmi is carved on the right chest of the Lord in the sitting pose and is an integral part of the Mula Murthi. The Yagyopvitam and a set of 4 necklaces or ornaments of the neck can also be clearly made out on the idol. The arms have armlets with finger-like projection which appear to be Nagabhushnams or cobra ornaments. A cobra is also said to be coiled around the Lord's right arm. The figure is depicted as wearing a dhoti from the waist downwards, while the upper portion is not covered by any dress or vastram. The nipples of the Lord on his chest are button-like and are prominent. There is, however, a katibandham or waistband, and this waistband is about 2 inches thick. The legs and feet of the Lord are beautifully shaped, strong and lissom. As indicated earlier, both the knees are bent and open slightly outward, giving the stately figure charm and grace that words cannot adequately describe. The feet are models of perfection and have ornaments near the anklets. The Lord's image has on the shoulders marks resembling scars made by the constant wearing of the bow and a pack of arrows. The perfectly modeled image of the Lord is personified beauty and is indeed a Divya Manohara Murthi. The image bears some resemblance to the famous Bodhisattva Padmapani painting in Cave Eye of the Ajanta Hills. Bodhisattva has of course only 2 arms, but if the Bodhisattva is shown with 4 arms and with his neck erect and his eyes in the Samadrishti pose instead of the Avanita Drishti pose, the Bodhisattva would appear as if it is a study of the Lord at Tirumalai. The figure is Syama in color and has 4 arms. It is not a Yogasthanaka Vishnu, as the right hand according to Maricha Sanhita has to be an Abhyahasta. In fact, the Lord only exhibits a Varadahasta and not an Abhyahasta. The other deities mentioned as essential for a Yogasthanaka image are absent. The image is also not a Bhoga or Veera or an Abhicharika Murthi, as one or the other of the characteristics mentioned in the Maricha Sanhita are not satisfied by the Murthi. One can therefore argue that the Lord's image is a superagamic manifestation, that is, one that existed before the Agamas came into being. Another plausible argument is that the image is a class by itself and not a simple Vishnu image. It is one that combines in the Hari and Hara aspects of the Supreme Spirit. Chapter 12. Nature of Image of the Lord of Tirumalai. Welcome to our exploration of the nature of the Lord of Tirumalai. This has been a topic of discussion for centuries, with devotees and scholars alike debating the true manifestation of Lord Venkateswara. Is he a manifestation of Vishnu or Shiva? Or perhaps Subramanya Swami or Shakti? These questions have agitated the minds of devotees time and again. Sri Vaishnavas hold that the Lord is Vishnu and Vishnu alone, while Shaivas, who see in him their Ishtadevam Shiva, hold with equal enthusiasm that he is Shiva. Some again hold the view that the image is that of Skanda. A few Sakti worshippers also believe that the deity is Parsakti. Several devotees of the Lord are again of the view that he is the combination of Vishnu and Shiva elements and is in fact a Harihara Murthi. There are again others who hold that Lord Venkateswara is manifestation of Parvasudeva. This controversy was actually argued by the contending parties in the 11th or 12th centuries AD before a Yadava Raja of Narayanavnam in the Jagannatha Mandalam. The Sri Venkatachala Itihas Mala, a Sanskrit work of the 12th century, describes in detail a scholarly discussion carried on at a high intellectual level long ago between the Vaishnavites led by Sri Ramanuj and the Saivites about the nature of the Lord's image at Tirumalai, whether it was a Shavite image or the image of Vishnu. The Saivites argued that the image of the Lord in Tirumalai is that of Skanda or Kumara Swami. They pointed to the holy Pushkarni on Tirumalai itself, which is therefore called Swami Pushkarni. They also noted that the image of the Lord has not got the characteristic weapons of Vishnu such as the Chakra and the Shankha. On the other hand, the Vaishnavas argued that the term Swami need not apply to Kumaraswamy. It only means that Swami Pushkarni is the Swami in Tirthams and thus a Lord among the holy Tirthas. They pointed out that the Lord's image has 4 arms and 1 face, whereas Skanda should normally have 6 faces and 12 hands. They also noted that the image does not bear the Sankha and Chakra because Lord Vishnu in his infinite divine grace parted with the weapons to assist his devotee Tandiman Chakravarti in battle against his enemies. It was Ramanuj who managed to place the weapons in the hands of the Murthi. The Itihas Mala then states that the local ruler was fully convinced by the arguments and gave his award in favor of the Vaishnavas. Before this, to put the matter beyond doubt, Ramanuj is said to have requested the king that the weapons of Vishnu and the weapons of Shiva should be made and left in the temple and the matter left for finalization by the Lord of Tirumalai himself. Accordingly, weapons of Vishnu and Shiva were placed before the Lord and the temple doors closed. That night Ramanuj is said to have approached the Lord as Adishesha and prayed to the Lord to assume the Vaishnavite weapons. And lo! When the temple doors were opened next morning, the Lord was found wearing the conch and the chakra. From the above account of controversy, it is clear that Ramanuj somehow managed to get the image declared as that of Vishnu. One thing that is lost sight of is the fact that the image must have been lying unclaimed at least for some time before being taken up for worship by Vaishnavas or by Shaivas. This is also clearly seen from the legendary account that the image was found buried in an anthill. This legend may be taken to mean that it was neglected by original devotees, though it may not have been actually in an anthill. There was never a time in the history of the region of Tondai Mandalam when either the Vaishnavites or the Saivites were so dormant, depressed and helpless. On the contrary, it was only the Buddhists who had to face the attacks of Saivites and Vaishnavites together. This was the reason for abandoning of the temples by the Buddhists at various places, as already seen. There were no Buddhists left to claim the image as theirs. The very fact that the Saivites and the Vaishnavites had to fight for a neglected image in an unimportant temple gives ample evidence that it belonged to neither of them. The arguments put forward by Ramanuj and the episode of weapons of Vishnu being taken over by the Lord himself might have satisfied the intelligence of Yadava Raja, but it is certainly not sufficient for people of this century. Thus the Vaishnavas and Shaivas, together, conspired to retain the Murthi for Brahmanic use. Chapter 13. Is the image a female deity? There's a group of devotees who claim the Lord of Tirumalai as a female deity. They base their claim on several points. For instance, they quote a verse from the Devi Bhagavatam which describes the Lord as Sri Venkateshwari, the only deity of Kali Yuga. Certain practices in the temple, such as the use of turmeric paste for the Abhishekam of the Lord, are also cited as evidence. Interestingly, the temple Vimanam has the Saktya symbol on it, the lion, and not the Garuda, as one would normally expect. However, it's important to note that the symbol of the lion does not necessarily imply Shakti worship. In fact, the lion was considered to be a Buddhist symbol from much earlier times than the Shakti Puja came into vogue. Lord Buddha was himself called Sakyasinha, meaning a lion among the Shakyas. The so-called lion capital of Asokan Sarnath pillar is in reality a Dhamma Chakra Pravartan capital. Dr. L.M. Joshi describes it as the Dharma Chakra capital and not the lion capital. Interestingly, the lions on the temple of Tirumalai do not have any Buddhist meaning. The Vimanam of this temple is built much later than the Buddhist times. However, the fact remains that Garuda is missing from the Vimanam. It's worth noting that the association of worship of a female deity with the worship of Vishnu is quite late. If the practice of using turmeric etc. denotes Shakti worship, then in the late phases of Buddhism, Tantrika Buddhism, the worship of the female element was predominant. In conclusion, the presence of male and female aspects in one and the same Murthi, both iconologically and historically, should go more in favor of it being a Buddhist image than that of Vishnu. Chapter 14. Is the Lord a Harihara Murthi? The worship of Harihara, the fused forms of Shiva and Vishnu, originated quite late, around the 8th or 9th century. This was much later than the appearance of the Murthi of Lord of Tirumalai. Despite this, modern scholarship is keen on declaring the Lord as a Harihara Murthi. Sitapati, a renowned scholar, presents several points in support of this theory. He mentions that the Lord's hill also bears the name Srisailam, which is sacred to Lord Shiva. He cites the famous Dvadsa Jyotirlinga Stotra of Sri Sankaracharya, which describes Mallikarjun of the Srisailam mountain, part of the Seshachalam hills. The Puranas view the range of hill from Tirupati to Srisailam, famous for its Mallikarjun temple, as one unit. However, none of these points provide concrete evidence of the Lord being a Harihara Murthi. They only connect the shrine of Tirumalai with Srisailam. On the contrary, this Puranic link supports the theory that these were Buddhist shrines. There's another hypothesis, known as Vyakta Vishnu and Vyakta Shiva. This suggests that the Lord's image is not a typical Harihara showing the fused forms of Vishnu and Shiva, but due to certain features resembling both Shiva and Vishnu being present in the Murthi, it is still a Harihara. Chapter 15. Account in Venkatachala Itihas Mala. In this episode, we delve into the accounts in Venkatachala Itihas Mala. Some scholars believe that the Murthi was declared as that of Vishnu even before Ramanuj's time. However, others consider the Venkatachala Itihas Mala as a book of fables. T.K.T. Veer Ragvachari, for instance, believes that the Itihas Mala, which mainly relates to the activities of Sri Ramanuj, defies facts and historical dates. But just because it is a palm leaf book, it need not be discarded. The best course would be to see if there is any additional evidence to corroborate the palm leaf text and base the judgment on it. S. Krishna Swami Iyengar, on the other hand, believes that the first three sections of the work are concerned with the discussion as to the Vaishnav character of the image. The remaining four sections are taken up with what Ramanuj did for the temple, and after him, his disciple Anantare. Ramanuj performed several important actions, such as publishing the Yadvaraja's award that the shrine was a Vishnu shrine, performing the initial purificatory rite of the great ablution of the temple, and restoring the rituals of worship as per Vaknasa Agama. The time of Ramanuj's visit to Tirupati can be precisely dated to about 1135 AD. This is based on the Venkatachala Itihas Mala's account that while Ramanuj was still in Tirupati, news of the removal of images of Govindaraja in the Govindaraja shrine in Chidambaram reached Tirupati. Despite all these works being done by Yadvaraya in consultation with Ramanuj, he did not put any inscriptions. This was possibly due to fear of displeasing the sovereign, who showed himself to be an enthusiastic follower of Saivism personally. However, the account in Venkatachala Itihas Mala is well corroborated by inscriptions. Dr.S. Krishna Swami Iyengar observes that even where there are miracles, the institutions based on them remain. The Venkatachala Itihas Mala seems to be a work composed at a period much later than Ramanuj, but it records the traditions coming down to the time. Thus, it could be noted that the fact of Lord accepting the weapons of Vishnu may be considered by devotees as a miracle, but the fact that the image was without weapons before Ramanuj and the weapons are present since his times is a historical fact. Chapter 16. Evidence of Alvars. The Alvars were worshippers of Vishnu, who moved from place to place, singing praises of Lord Vishnu and advocating the tenets of what later became known as Vaishnavism. They produced marvelous poetry in the Tamil language. Their teachings about caste and the position of women were influenced by Buddhism and Jainism, the prevalent religions of the time. However, they opposed these religions and propagated Brahmanism. The Alvars are known for their devotion to the avatars of Vishnu, particularly Varha, Narsimha, Vaman, Rama, and Krishna. The Lord of Tirumalai is praised as one or more of these popular avatars. Interestingly, some verses by the early Alvars suggest that the Lord of Tirumalai was considered by them to be Siva rather than Vishnu, or Siva in combination with Vishnu. These verses describe the image with long-hanging jata, and the shining malu, i.e., axe and crown, chakra, and coiling round serpent. However, Raghavacharya asserts that it is an absolute truth that the image has no jata depicted integrally on the image, there is no serpent coiling round any portion of the body, and neither sankham, chakram, or malu is an integral part of the image. This has led to a perplexing situation for modern scholars. Some scholars, like Sitapati, resolve this by saying that the Lord was always considered as Vyakta Vishnu and Vyakta Avyakta Siva. Sitapati observes that the image combines qualities of Vishnu and Siva. The verses of the Alvars had gone into oblivion and were later resurrected. The Alvars flourished in centuries before Shankaracharya. The only religious sects known to the Alvars were Vaishnavism, Saivism, Lingam worship, Buddhism and Jainism. The worship during the Alvars' time was not much organized, and there was no singing of prabandhams during their own times. It started quite late. Ramanuj had created 74 Arya Purushas with hereditary rights of succession to spread Vishishtadvaita philosophy and temple worship, in contrast to Shankara's teachings. As most of the Alvars belonged to the Shudra caste, it is said that they abstained from ascending the hill which was considered sacred. However, it is mentioned that each Alvar visited the hill once, except Nammalvar who visited twice. Chapter 17. Description of the Murthi by the Alvars. Interestingly, none of the early Alvars described the Murthi in detail. The verses from which the hypothesis of Vyakta Vishnu Vyakta Vyakta Siva is formulated belong to the early Alvars, i.e., Poigai, Tei, and Buddhatan. However, their descriptions could be interpreted to suggest a combination of both Siva and Vishnu. Poigai Alvar alluded to the Archa form of Vishnu in the form of Krishna. Tirumalai Alvar's description is more elaborate, stating that the deity was standing on the deforested ground. He changed his religion from Buddhism to Jainism and Saivism successively, and at last found rest and salvation by pinning his faith in the worship of Narayana. Nammalvar's description of the Murthi is conceptual. His verses are uttered in emotional tension, as psychic and spiritual experiences, due to his inability to go to Vengadam for Sharanagati. Sri Andal, in her Natchiyar Tirumalai, makes a reference to the presence of Devi on the Lord's chest. From the above discussion, it is clear that the so-called evidence of Alvars for Vyakta Vishnu Vyakta Vyakta Siva is very flimsy. It is not only false but misleading. In any case, the evidence of Alvars is useless in any dispute where a Buddhist claim is involved, because Alvars were quite hostile to Buddhists. Chapter 18. Hostilities of Alvars towards Buddhism. Interestingly, the Alvars copied the Buddhists in terms of doctrine, placing women on an equal footing with men in the spiritual field. Nammalvar's creed is that even a Chandala by birth is a person fit to receive our obeisance if he is only a Narayana Bhakta. Caste is no barrier. However, the Alvars were bitter enemies of Buddhists. This hostility is evident in the fact that the Vaishnavite and Savite saints of southern India fought Buddhism on the ground of bhakti and vanquished it. It is said that they sang Buddhism and Jainism out of their provinces. Tirumnagai Alvar, a petty chieftain of Alinadu in Tanjore district, is said to have stolen a solid golden image of Buddha from a monastery in Nagpatam to pay for renovating the temple of Srirangam. His hymns are equally full of good poetry and attacks on Jainism and Buddhism. Tirumalai Alvar states that the Sramanas are ignorant men, while the Buddha are under a delusion, while those that have fallen into to Siva are of comparatively inferior intellect. Those who will not worship the fragrant feet of Vishnu are indeed inferior people. Even Nammalvar, who was denied status of Kulpati only because of his low caste, inaugurated his campaign of evangelical work and addressed himself to Saivites, Lingaits, Jains and Buddhists. He rejoiced the fall of Buddhist seats, saying that Kali Yugam has ended and Krita Yugam has set in, Yam has no more work, and the angels of the Lord are come and are dancing in ecstasy because the heretical seats have been destroyed. May this gain in strength and glory. He found that Vishnu Bhaktas had grown in numbers and in strength. From all the above evidences, it is quite clear that the Alvars were quite hostile to Buddhists. They did whatever was in their power to uproot Buddhism from this land, even going to the extent of committing a theft of a golden image of Buddha. Tirumalai was a compromise site. Alvars had to join hands with Savate saints to fight Buddhism. The selection of Vengadam was a compromise site. The important point that is missed by the scholars is why Tirumalai was a compromise site. Raghavacharya observes that when faced with the spread of Buddhism and Jainism, they, Alvars, were put to necessity of postulating a god and a religion which was neither rank Saivism nor rank Vaishnavism. Tiruvengaramudayan was thus represented as the only true god who combines in himself all the Murthis. The so-called main evidence of this theory, the evidence of Alvars, is discussed above, and no valuable inference can be derived from Alvars' verses, and the theory of Vyakta Vishnu, Vyakta Vyakta Siva is a false and misleading myth which has no historical background, and it needs to be abandoned forthwith. Chapter 19. Iconographical examination of Lord's image. In reality, the image of Lord of Tirumalai has only two prominent hands, these being in Varda and Katyavlambita mudras. Originally, there were no weapons in its hands but Sankha and Chakra were fixed later on to the Lord by Ramanuj. The image does not fit in with the description of Vishnu images as per the Shastras and Agamas. Therefore, it is considered by Sri Sitapati that it was a super-agamic manifestation and the image was probably made before the Agamas came into existence. Images of Vishnu are classified into three main classes. 1. Dhruvabheras. 2. Avataras and 3. Vyuhas. As the image of Lord of Tirumalai is considered only as a Dhruvabhera, we will only discuss Dhruvabheras. Vishnu images usually have 4 arms. Not a single image is found in India belonging to Gupta age or post-Gupta age having 2 arms. There were Vishnu images having 2 arms, but those are believed to be of Kushna age. Only 5 such images are described. These 2-armed images are not showing any mudras of hands, but they are holding some or the other weapons of Vishnu. It is clear that the image of Lord of Tirumalai does not fit in with the description of any of the 2-armed Vishnu images, either of post-Gupta, Gupta, or pre-Gupta age. The exhibition of mudras of hand is hardly seen in Brahmanical images. Varada mudra and Abhya mudra are seen equally in Buddhist as well as Brahmanic images. The weapons are seen in the hands of Brahmanic images in place of exhibition of mudras in the Buddhist images. Ramanuj had accepted that the Murti had no weapons. He had argued that the image does not bear the Sankha and Chakra because Lord Vishnu in his infinite divine grace parted with the weapons to assist his Tandiman Chakravarti in battle against his enemies. It is well known that Vajantimala and Srivatsa are popular marks in Vishnu images. But it is ignored that Srivatsa mark is present on Buddhist images also. About this necklace, which was associated with Vishnu images, Rao observes that the Vaijayanti is a necklace composed of a successive series of groups of gems, each group wherein has 5 gems in a particular order. It would be remembered that in the description of Lord of Tirumalai, there is a remarkable absence of Vajantimala. This should give clear idea that Lord of Tirumalai has got more features of Buddhist Murthis rather than Vishnu Murthis. Chapter 20. Lakshmi on chest of Lord of Tirumalai. In this chapter, we delve into the presence of Lakshmi on the chest of the Lord of Tirumalai. The image of Lakshmi forms an integral part of the Mula Murthi of Lord of Tirumalai. It is represented as a seated image in the Padmasana or lotus pose. She has 4 arms, the 2 upper hold lotus buds, the right lower arm is in the Abhya pose, the other lower arm on the left is in the Vardahasta pose. Interestingly, Lakshmi was originally a Buddhist deity. The idea of Lakshmi as one of the consorts of Vishnu is deeply ingrained in present-day Indian psyche. However, the earliest archaeological representation of this form of Devi is found only in Buddhist sculpture and not in Brahmanic ones. Saraswati was also a Buddhist deity. The earliest representation was evident in Buddhist monuments and not in the Brahmanic ones. It may seem strange, but it is true that Lakshmi was originally not related to Vishnu. Before Lakshmi came to be recognized as one of the consorts of Vishnu, her position in Brahmanic tradition was not very steady. However, we have to consider the time when Lakshmi got accepted as a consort of Vishnu. It was Alvars who for the first time propagated Lakshmi as consort of Vishnu in South India. This raises another question. If Lakshmi was not considered as the consort of Vishnu as late as the time of Alvars, then how do you account for her presence on the chest of Lord of Tirumalai? This discussion should be sufficient to show that the image of Lakshmi found on the chest of Lord of Tirumalai does not exclude it from being considered as a Buddhist image. At the same time, the mere presence of Lakshmi on the chest of this idol does not prove that the idol is that of Vishnu. Chapter 21. Buddhist Images and Lord of Tirumalai. Before the image of Buddha came into existence, various symbols were worshipped. These included the white elephant, symbolizing the birth of Lord Buddha, the lotus denoting the steps Buddha took immediately after birth, and the horse, denoting Mahabhinishkraman. Other symbols include the Bodhi tree and Vajraasana, both denoting enlightenment, Gandhakuti, denoting his cottage, the begging ball, Ushnisha, Prabhamandal, Dhammachakra, footprints, and Triratna, denoting Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. The image of Buddha was made at the beginning of the Christian era. In the 3rd regnal year of Kanishka, a huge Buddha image was installed at Sarnath by Bhikshu Bala and is labeled as Bodhisattva. Bodhisattva are beings who are in the process of obtaining, but have not yet obtained Buddhahood, such as Gautama or Siddhartha before attainment of Nirvana. The Bodhisattva was also not depicted in human form earlier, but symbols were used. Avalokitesvara is the personification of compassion. He is full of mercy and extends his ever-helping hand to all those who seek him in distress. Avalokitesvara is often depicted as a well-dressed figure who holds a lotus flower in his right hand or bears a lotus on it. The presence of Jata, Jutas, and Nagabhushanams was one of the points raised by the Saivites against Ramanuj's claim. The presence of Jata Jutas may be argued as a point against Murthi being a Vishnu, but certainly it cannot be argued against it being a Bodhisattva. The presence of Yagnopvitam on Lord of Tirumalai may cause some confusion because it denotes recognition of supremacy of higher castes, which Buddhism never believed in. Therefore one would expect that there should be no Yagnopvitam was also installed. Chapter 22. Early History of Vengadam and Sangam Age. Contrary to the popular belief propagated by Brahmanic scholars, the mainstream Indian culture was not Vedic. In fact, the Indus Valley culture played a significant role in the development and preservation of Indian culture. The Nagas, who resided in vast territories of India during the Pandav times and thereafter, were undoubtedly non-Aryans. The Nagas were not aboriginal or uncivilized people. They occupied a high cultural level and ruled a good part of India. The scholars believe that the people who inhabited South India were the descendants of people from the Indus Valley civilization. The creators of the Indus civilization were the forefathers of the Dravidians, who today mainly inhabit southern India. The Nagas were sympathizers and followers of Buddha. The Naga culture, based on Buddha's principles of equality, played the greatest role in establishing a casteless, egalitarian and integrated society in Indian cultural life. The Nagas had their republics. From the first to the beginning of the 4th century AD, the central countries in India comprised of strong republics of Nagas. The region of Tondamandalam was included in the empire of Asoka. The political unification of India under the Mauryas was very real, and the court of Patliputra was interested in occurrences in the extreme south of the peninsula. The earliest inscriptions found in South India were definitely Buddhist. The short Brahmi inscriptions found in natural rock caverns in the hill of the south have many features in common with the similar, but more numerous, records of Ceylon. The inscriptions from the ancient cities of Madurai and Karuru reveal that monuments were donated by a diverse group of people, including a husbandman from Ceylon, a woman, merchants, and members of the Karani caste. These inscriptions bear testimony to the support commanded by ascetics from all classes of the laity. However, there is no evidence that the Tamil people in general had accepted Jainism or Buddhism in this early period. Historian Sastari places more importance on the literary evidences of Sangam poets of a later date than on these inscriptions. However, these inscriptions do provide clear evidence that South India was very much under the influence of Buddhism and that the Brahmanic influence was minimal. Barnett observes that even in the first entry of the Christian era, the South seems to have felt little influence from the Aryan culture of northern India. Some Brahman colonies had made their way into the South, but on the whole, they counted for little in the life of the people. Dravidian society was still free from the yoke of the Brahman caste system. The Satavahanas, who ruled from the 3rd century BC, were Buddhists and not of Brahmanic faith. Buddhism was well established and continued to flourish throughout the Satavahana period. The stupa of Amravati was enlarged and embellished, and new stupas were built at Alluru, Gumandiduru, Ghantasala, Gudivada, and Goli. After the Satavahanas, the Ikshvakus of Shripravta came to power. The Ikshvakus ruled over the Krishna-Guntur region. The reign of Virpurisdatta, the son of the founder of the line, formed a glorious epoch in the history of Buddhism and in diplomatic relations. Tondamnadalam was the land of the Nagas. The Nagas were the followers and supporters of Buddhism. The old name of Vengadam was Pullikunran, the land of Pulis. These Pulis were the rulers of Vengadam and were known as Kalabhras. When the Satavahanas put pressure on them, these anti-Brahmanic Buddhist people migrated to the whole of South India and ruled most of it for centuries. The Kalabhras are roundly denounced as evil kings who uprooted many Adhirajas and abrogated Brahmadaya rights. There was no love lost between these interlopers and the people of the lands they overran. The Cholas disappeared from the Tamil land almost completely in this debacle. During this time, most of the works grouped under the 18 minor works were written, along with the Silapadikaran, Manimekhlai, and other works. Interestingly, many of the authors were votaries of what were then considered heretical sects, namely Buddhists and Jains. Now, let's talk about the Kalabhras, often referred to as wicked. These were Buddhists who seized the Pandya country long after Mudukudumi. They overthrew many great kings and resumed even Brahmadaya lands, making them formidable and ruthless conquerors. Their power was eventually broken by Kodungo Pandya and Singhavishnu Pallava and Chalukya campaigns against them in the 7th and 8th centuries. Identifying the Kalabhras is a difficult problem in South Indian history. They have been identified with various groups, including the line of Muttariyar of Kondubalur, Karnatas, and Kalappalar of the Vellala community. However, the most satisfactory theory identifies the Kalabhras with the Kalavar, the chieftains of this tribe mentioned in Sangam literature. Despite the various explanations, the Kalabhras are regarded as mysterious people who convulsed the affairs of the Tamil country for a few centuries. They caused the dispersal of the Cholas, and in the Pandya country, even Brahmadeya gifts were not treated as sacrosanct by these predatory Kalabhras. The Muttariyar and Kodunabnalar chiefs of Kalabhra origin were feudatory to the Pallavas and the Pandyas respectively. The Muttariyar ruled over Tanjore and Pudukottai as the feudatories of the Pallavas from the 8th century to the 11th. The history of Cholas of Urayur is exceedingly obscure from the 4th to the 9th century, chiefly owing to the occupation of their country by the Kalabhras. Buddhadatta, the great writer in Pali, belonged to Urayur. He mentions his contemporary, King Achyutavikranta of the Kalbharkula, as ruling over the Chola country from Kaveripatnam. He was a Buddhist, and Tamil literary tradition refers to an Achyuta who kept the Chera, Chola, and Pandya king in captivity. In conclusion, during the period from Satvahanas to the ascendancy of imperial Pallavas and even in later times, the area of Tondamandalam was inhabited by the Buddhist people and ruled by the Buddhist kings. They ruled whole of South India for about 3 centuries. These Kalabhras were termed as uncivilized, wicked, and by all sorts of abuses, and their history suppressed, with only evidences remaining extant in Buddhist books. The real bone of contention seems to be that they cancelled the rights of the Brahmins from the Brahmadeya villages, i.e., the villages gifted to Brahmins. Chapter 23. Emperuman, Buddha or Vishnu. Among the Murthis, or divine representations, one of the most significant is Bhoga Srinivasa or Manvala Perumal. This silver replica of the Lord was consecrated in the Snapna Mandapa, marking a significant development in the regularity of worship. Interestingly, the term used to denote worshippers of Vishnu changed around 966 AD from Emperumandiya to Sri Vaishnavas. This change is significant as it indicates a shift in religious beliefs and practices. The term Emperuman, which was used to denote Vishnu worshippers, could also be applicable to Lord Buddha. This suggests that the change in terminology might have been made to avoid any confusion between Vishnu and Buddha among recent converts to Vaishnavism. The system of Devdasis, or temple dancers, also has its roots in this period. These women, who were originally Buddhist nuns, were degraded to the status of Devdasis after the fall of Buddhism. This system, which started around 1000 AD, is not just an economic practice but also has religious facets. For instance, Devdasis have a firm religious belief that they must not get married. In conclusion, the religious history of South India is complex and multifaceted. The devotees of the Lord of Tirumalai, known as Emperumandiyars, were Buddhists, suggesting that the Lord of Tirumalai was a Buddhist deity. This provides a fascinating insight into the religious dynamics of the region. Chapter 24. Proxy image of Lord and Bhoga Srinivasa. From around 830 AD to 966 AD, a crucial period unfolded in the history of the Lord of Tirumalai and Indian Buddhism. This was the time when Brahmanism gained ground and Buddhism faced defeat. The attack of Brahmanism against Buddhism was multi-pronged. Philosophers like Kumaril and Shankara fought on Karmakanda and Vedanta respectively, while Nainars focused on Shaivism and Alvaras on Vaishnavism, both on Bhakti. The Rajputs were created to fight militarily, and the Acharyas were engaged in Shastrartha. All this was happening at a time when foreign hordes of the newly formed religion of Muhammad were knocking on the western borders. The leaders of this country were more interested in driving away the Buddhists rather than stopping the invaders. The country paid a heavy price for it. The history of modern Hindu Tirupati starts not at Tirumalai or Chandragiri, but at Trichannur. The first inscription concerning the temple of Venkateswara is found here, mentioning that a proxy image of Lord was installed at Trichannur. There were actually 3 images installed. One was Mula Murthi, second was Utsava Murthi, and the third one was specially meant for conversion of people to Vaishnavism. The first records are not at Tirumalai. T.K.T. Veera Raghvacharya observes that the earliest inscriptions are to be found only in Tiruchinur. The main point to note in this inscription is that a Tiruvilankoil, or a proxy temple, for the Tiruvengadam deity was built and that a proxy deity was set up. The purpose of the proxy image was religious conversion. Veera Raghvacharya says it was due to the activities of Alvars and specially due to the work of Tirumangai that this temple came up. The main object was to start the conversion to Vaishnavism. This was the time when Brahmanism got itself braced to combat Buddhism on all fronts. It made tremendous changes in its criminal, civil and personal laws to fight Buddhism with all might. These changes are termed Kalivarjya, i.e. forbidden in Kali age. This was also the time when the religious activities against the Buddhists were at their zenith. Brahmanism started a countrywide crusade against Buddhism. In the twofold process of assimilation and condemnation of Buddhism, the Brahmanical priests sacrificed at the altar of mythical Vishnu even the most historical and overwhelmingly non-Brahmanical personality of Buddha and mystified the historical existence of Buddhism as a delusive trick of a Puranic god. The Buddha was recognized as an incarnation of Vishnu before 1014 AD, as estimated by Pandharpur. This recognition likely occurred before the 8th century, as suggested by the approximate date assigned to the temple at Sirpur. The Brahmins' decision to include Buddha in their avatars was not necessarily due to an appreciation of his ideas and ideals. Instead, it was likely a strategic move to draw the masses away from Buddhism. Adherence to Chaturvarnya was essential to Brahmanism, and following Buddha would have meant abandoning it. Therefore, they adopted Buddha in name only. Buddha had deeply penetrated the Indian mind. His teachings were popularized and broadcast through a vast amount of Pali and Sanskrit literature. Many emperors and thinkers had espoused his rational and humanitarian mission. He was too great to be neglected and naturally came in as the most exalted member in the galaxy of avatars. The acceptance of Buddha as an incarnation had been accomplished probably in the 6th century AD, first in the Matsya Purana. New Puranas were written, and old ones were edited and re-edited to support Chaturvarnya and give stories for the new revival of Brahmanism. Sthala Puranas and myths were invented to capture and retain Buddhist places of worship. During this time, Alvars and Nayanaras formed bhajan parties, and they were singing out Buddhism out of the country. Vaishnavas and Shaivas were coming together. In the Rashtrakuta reign, which had started in the northern part of Deccan, the images of Buddha were being chiseled out from the monuments at Ellora. Archaeological evidence at Ellora shows shrines like the Kailas were being excavated, where Vishnu and Shiva Murthis were coming up side by side. This was also the time when the work of 7 pagodas, also called the Rathas at Mahabalipuram, seems to have stopped. The great monuments were left unfinished. These 7 pagodas were meant to be Buddhist structures and had to be relinquished by Buddhists because of anti-Buddhist sentiments all around. During this time, a new people, i.e., Rajputs, were coming up on the horizon in North India. They were made prominent by Brahmanism for the specific purpose of suppressing Buddhism by use of force. On the top of Metricton, Abu, an yajna was conducted where certain new clans were created to fight against Buddhism. This rite was called Hiranyagarbha Mahadana, and the king was designated as Hiranyagarbha Prasutta, i.e., one who performed the sacred rite of Hiranyagarbha. Also, some tribal chiefs were among those who were made the Rajputs. For example, the house of Mewar, which played an important role in the political and military history of India and gave heroes like Bapa Raval, Rana Sanga, and Rana Pratap. That concludes our exploration of the historical context and implications of Buddha's inclusion in the avatars of Vishnu. Kumarila Bhatta, a fierce critic of Buddhism, is reported to have organized religious crusades against Buddhists. He is said to have instigated King Sudhamvan of Ujjaini to exterminate the Buddhists. This report has not been accepted by modern scholars as a genuine and historical fact. However, there are independent sources that allude to some historical episodes in which the Brahmanical followers persecuted the followers of Shakyamuni in the country around Ujjain. During this time, the proxy image of Lord at Tirumalai was installed in a proxy temple at Tiruchannur under the guidance of Tirumangai Alvar. It is believed that the real reason for providing a shrine at Tiruchannur was religious conversion rather than just simple convenience of devotees to avoid climbing the hill. By 966 AD, things had changed. Buddhists were suppressed. The quarrels among Vaishnavites and Saivites started now. The coming up of a Saiva temple at Tiruchakkanur is said to be the cause of this. During the activities of the proxy temple, the devotees of the Lord on the hill were indoctrinated to Vishnu worship and they had to be shifted back to the original shrine on the hill. By this time masses had forgotten that it was Buddha they were worshipping as an avatara of Vishnu. Now the devotees are told to worship the Lord as Vishnu, not as a Buddhavatara Vishnu but as avatara of Krishna, prominently. Then the great Ramanuj comes on the scene and regularizes worship and adjusts all loose ends, whatever there might have been. A new township, by name Tirupati, is established at the foot of the hill and its importance increased rather artificially. And thus the conversion becomes full, final and irreversible. But until the Vijayanagar kingdom comes, still there is no Garuda shrine and no Veda recital. That concludes our exploration of the historical context and implications of the activities of Kumarila Bhatta, Vachaspati Misra, and Acharya Sankara. Chapter 25. Silapadikaran. Ramanuj is known for declaring the Murthi as a Vishnu shrine by placing the Sankha and Chakra in its hands. However, some believe that it was a Vaishnavite shrine even before that time, citing the evidence from Silapadikaran. This ancient Tamil epic tells the tragic story of Kovalan and his wife Kannagi. During their journey, they meet a Vaishnav Brahman from Malabar who was travelling to visit Vishnu shrines. Dr. Krishnaswamy Iyengar quotes a verse from Silapadikaran to show that the image had a fearsome disc and milk-white conch. He argues that this gives clear evidence that the shrine at Tirupati had a reputation of being a Vishnu shrine. However, this theory is not universally accepted. There are several reasons for this. Firstly, it assumes that there were no interpolations and that the whole of Silapadikaran was received by us in its original form. Secondly, It presupposes that we know exactly when those particular lines, mentioning Sankha and Chakra, were written. Unfortunately, scholars do not agree with the dates of this epic, and there is great confusion about the dates. Thirdly, the author of Silapadikaran, Ilango Adigal, was a scholar not belonging to Brahmanism, but who was either a Jain or Buddhist. His being non-Brahmanic is considered by Iyengar to be important, and the account given by him about the Vengadam hill to be more reliable and authentic. Fourthly, Silapadikaran does not only describe the Sankha and Chakra, but also a bow in the hands. To presume that at one time the Murthi had a bow, but was later removed would not be in keeping with the known history. Lastly, the mention of Tiruvenkatam in Silapadikaran need not necessarily apply to Tiruvenkatam of Tirupati. Therefore, Silapadikaran is a very poor evidence to show that the Murthi had Chakra and Shankha on him in the 8th century. Even if one insists on this description having historical importance, it merely brings back the date of fixing of the weapons to the Murthi from Ramanuj's time to Silapadikaran's time. The fact remains that the weapons were not originally there and were fixed by somebody at a later date. Chapter 26. Tonsures at Tirupati. Welcome to our exploration of the unique custom of tonsure at the Tirupati temple. This practice is not only performed by men, but also by women, both married and unmarried. Devotees visit this temple with the intention of offering their hair to the Lord, a practice considered praiseworthy and believed to confer great merit. The tonsure ceremony at Tirumalai is unique. Pilgrims usually offer the hair on their head to the Lord as a devotional offering. Those in need of the Lord's assistance often take a vow and, upon visiting the temple, offer their hair at the Kalyankatta, a special hall erected for this purpose. A bath in the Pushkarini follows the tonsure ceremony, after which the pilgrims enter the temple to worship the Lord. Interestingly, despite the long-standing practice of tonsure at this temple, there are no legends or inscriptions about it. The Tirumalai temple inscriptions mention food offerings made to the Lord, but no mention is made of this curious custom of offering hair. There are 3 possible reasons for the start of the ceremonial tonsure: to stress humility, conversion of other sects to Vaishnavism, and monetary reasons. Of these, the point of conversion of other sects into the Vaishnav fold is particularly noteworthy. It is suggested that those converted to the Vaishnav fold were already used to, and rather fond of, the ceremonial tonsure at temples and did not want to give up the practice even after conversion to Vaishnavism. This practice of tonsure was one of the old practices of Buddhists. To become a Shramnar or Shramneri and to stay at a place of worship, pilgrimage, or a center of learning for a few days in attendance with the masters, the essential requirement was the tonsure of the head at that time. This practice is prevalent even today in most of the countries where Buddhism is a living faith. In conclusion, the practice of tonsure at the Tirupati temple is a unique custom with a very hoary past. Despite being considered inauspicious in Hindu tradition, it has been adopted and continues to be practiced by all castes, predominantly by the non-twice borns. This practice does not conform with the rules of Puranas and is not a traditional method of Vishnu worship. Yet, it endures as a testament to the complex and diverse practices of faith. Tonsuring, or the act of shaving one's head, is a common practice at Tirumalai, a Vishnu temple. However, it's been suggested that this practice is not in line with the tenets of Vaishnavism. Offering of hair has been equated to the symbolic offering of one's head, but this involves himsa or han, which contradicts the principles of Vaishnavism. Historically, hair offerings have been depicted in 7th century reliefs at Mahabalipuram for the Devi Vakpati. Tantric ascetics considered shikha, or a tuft of hair, as an important element to be worshipped. The offering of shikha was a significant ritual in the initiation of Tantric ascetics. This practice is still prevalent among the Nathpanthis. However, the connection of these cults with Vaishnavism is unclear. These cults are considered heretical and are closer to Buddhism than to Brahmanism. Nathism, in fact, is viewed as a corrupt form of Buddhism, believed to have originated from Buddhist Nikayas during the general decline of Buddhism. In ancient times, tonsuring was also performed as a punishment or sentence by law. It was believed that whatever sin a man commits, it becomes centered in the hair. For the same offense, the punishment by ancient law was cutting off an arm in case of a non-Brahman and only a tonsure in the case of a Brahman. This discrimination resulted in societal condemnation and deprivation of the means of sustenance for the punished Brahmins. However, it's important to note that people who undergo tonsure at Tirumalai do not feel any guilt. They undergo tonsure gladly with full religious reverence. This type of tonsure as prayaschitas, or penance, has nothing to do with tonsures in Tirumalai. In conclusion, Hindu Shastras do not recognize tonsure as a votive offering to a deity. Preservation of a tuft of hair on the top is obligatory for the followers of Brahmanism. Young unmarried maidens and married women are not to shave. Only widows are shaven-headed. Shaven-headed men, and not only women, were considered inauspicious. Shaving was done as punishments and in case of death of relatives. In short, it was an occasion for sorrow and mourning. Therefore, the traditional custom of tonsures performed at Tirumalai as a religious ceremony cannot be viewed upon as a custom of the Brahmanic religion. The absence of legends or epigraphs about tonsures suggests that the practice of tonsure at Tirumalai is the relic of an old Buddhist custom and suggests the Buddhist origin of the Tirumalai deity. Chapter 27. Rathyatra. Welcome to our exploration of the intriguing practice of Rathyatra, an important part of Brahmotsavam, a popular festival drawing huge crowds at the hill temple. The festival commences with the Dhwajrohanam ceremony, where the Lord's flag with the Garuda emblem is flown on a flagstaff erected next to the Dhwajastambhan. The Lord's Utsava Vigraham is also taken in procession twice, once in the daytime and again in the nighttime with the appropriate Vahanam. The important festival days are the 5th, 8th, and 11th days. The morning procession of the Lord on the 7th day with Surya Prabha Vahanam is also worth seeing. The Utsavam on the night of the 5th day is called the Garuda Seva or Garudotsavam. On this day, the processional deity alone is taken in procession on the Garuda. The deity is then taken and installed on Garuda Vahanam. The Vahanam is then taken in procession around the east, west, north, and south Mada streets of Tirumalai. The car festival takes place on the 8th day. This Rathotsvam attracts the largest crowds during the Brahmotsavam festival days. The Utsava Murthi along with the consorts is brought onto the temple car and the temple car is then gaily decorated. The temple chariot is to be taken round the streets of Tirumalai. On the 11th day of the festival, the processional deity is taken on a Tiruchi Vahanam to the Swami Pushkarni. The chakram of the Lord then gets a bath in the Swami Pushkarini. The Brahmotsavam comes to an end with this snana or bathing of the Lord in the Pushkarini. From this description, it should be clear that the procession of the deity, i.e., Ratha Yatra, forms the main and popular part of this festival. We will see further that Ratha Yatra, though seen in many modern Brahmanic temples, is basically a Buddhist practice and a relic of Buddhist tradition. Ratha Yatra was seen by Fahe. All the above evidences belong to the 11th century and onwards. That was the time when the practice of Ratha Yatra started among the Hindus. As a matter of fact, this was an imitation of the Buddhist practice of Ratha Yatra, which was seen in Buddhist temples even 500 years before the above-mentioned instances of Ratha Yatra in Hindu temples. Why Ratha Yatra cannot be considered as Brahmanical practice would be clear if we consider that the Varna Dharma which led to the caste system is sine qua non of Brahmanism. It is not possible for a Hindu to indulge in activities which will be conducive to the mixing of various castes. And what is a Ratha Yatra, if it is not the free mixing of people of different castes? Not only the deities, but also the priests are exposed to people of various castes in a Ratha Yatra. Ancient Hindu literature is full of evidence to show that free mixing of people of different castes is sacrilegious to Brahmanical tenets. So Ratha Yatras are Shramanic in origin, started by Buddhists and then by Jains but later on copied by people of Brahmanic religion, much against their wishes, and now it persists there as a relic of Buddhist faith. Venkateswara Suprabhatam, a waking up ceremony of Lord performed every morning by singing the praises, was composed, according to tradition, in the 14th century. As per Maricha Sanhita Shri Vimnarchana Kalpa, the Lord is worshipped as Guru. It is noteworthy that both Jagannatha and Vitthala are confirmed to be old Buddhist shrines, as already seen. Chapter 28. Temple and its sculptures. The present temple, which dates back to pre-Ramanuj days, has two gopurams and two outer prakarams with two circumambulatory paths. The third path around the sanctum, called Mukkoti Pradaksinam, is now incomplete due to later construction and is open only for one day in the year. Interestingly, despite the presence of two wells within the temple premises, the water from these wells was not used for puja until the time of Ramanuj. This unusual practice may have been due to caste prejudices. It's noteworthy that two wells were allowed to be dug up by a Shudra within the temple premises, suggesting that the temple originally belonged to lower caste people. The sanctum sanctorum or Garbhagriha, which was called Koyal Alvar, is a square-shaped structure with double walls. The temple type consisting of a Garbhagriham with a Mukha Mantapam with a Pradikashanapat got established in South India about the 8th century AD. The Garbhagriha houses only one Mula Murthi, making the temple unique as it is the only Ekamurthi temple for Vishnu in India. The Snapna Mantapam or Tiruvilankoil is another structure from pre-Ramanuj days. It was here that the Bhoga Srinivasa, the silver replica donated by a Pallava queen, was consecrated in the year 966 AD. The pillars of this Mantapam bear the Vaishnav bas-reliefs now. The renovation of the temple was carried out to make it conform with the agamic rules. The walls of the Garbhagriham were not conforming to agamas, so alcoves were made on the renovated temple to agree with agamic norms. In the renovated temple, the first Avram or Pradakshanam deliberately built was soon closed, and Ramarmedi was formed by putting walls across the eastern part of the path. Another important point to note is about the Garuda shrine. This shrine was constructed rather crudely in 1417 AD. The earliest mention of Garuda in Tirumalai Devasthanam inscriptions is in 1446 AD, and it is seen that offerings given are only for the Garuda figure painted on the flag. The earliest inscriptions mentioning Garudalvar residing in his own shrine is in the year 1512 AD, which is presumed to be the time of its coming into being. It is rather strange that though since Ramanuj's time, it is considered as a Vishnu shrine, the Garuda shrine should make its appearance so late. This concludes our exploration of the temple and its sculptures. Chapter 29. Identification of Tirupati with Potalka. The origin of Tantrika Buddhism was previously thought to be in Assam and Bengal. But now, it is believed that it actually started in South India, with Potalka, a mountain in South India, as its center. L.M. Joshi observes that Potalka Parvata has been suggested as a third possible early seat of the origin of Vajrayana in the far south, apart from Dhanyaktaka and Sri Pravta. This suggestion is based on the authority of Suensang, the Sadhanamala, and the Gilgit text of the Sarvtathagatadisthanasattvavlokna Biddhaksetrasendarsanavyuha. The text quoted above was translated by Itsing in AD 701. N. Dutt, the editor of the text, places this book in the 5th or 6th century AD. The text locates Buddha's residence at Potalka, in South India, referred to by Xuanzang as the abode of Avalokitesvara. Xuanzang has described various places from South India as Buddhist centers, 3 among them being the most important. These were Dhanyaktaka, Sri Parvata, and Potalka. Out of these 3, Dhanyaktaka and Sri Parvata have been identified with Amravati and Nagarjunakonda respectively. The third one, Potalka, is not identified as yet, to any degree of satisfaction, though it is lately suggested to be identified with Potarlanka in Devi Taluk of district, Krishna, not far away from Amravati, Bhattiprolu region, where an exuberance of the images of Tara was found. Potalka was most inaccessible. Tarnatha has given the following description of this. He mentions Acharya Dignaga being born in a Brahmana family in the city of Singavakta near Kanchi in the south. He received Pravajya from Nagdatta, who was Vatsiputriya and also learned in doctrines of Tirthikas. Narrating about the period of Dignaga, Tarnatha mentions about an Upaska going to Potalka or Potala, the residence of Avalokitesvara and Aryatara. This Upaska was sent to Potalka to invite Avalokitesvara. The Upaska knew that the journey was long and hazardous and risky to life. He took with him a road guide to Potala. About the identification of Potalka, many efforts have been made in modern times. Shri L.M. Joshi has summarized the position about the identification in the following words. This Potalka is located by Xuanzang in Malkuta, identified by Cunningham with a tract between Madura, Tanjore, and Travancore. Nandolal D suggested that Potalka lay in Western Ghats. N. Dutt suggests that modern Potiyam may represent Potalka. This Potalka was near Dhanyaktaka and Sri Pavta, which places have been identified with Amravati and Nagarjunakonda respectively. The description of Potalka in Xuanzang's own words is as follows. To the east of the Malaya mountains is Mount Piotalukia, Potlaka. The passes of this mountain are very dangerous, its sides are precipitous, and its valleys rugged. On the top of the mountain is a lake, its waters are clear as a mirror. From a hollow proceeds a great river which encircles the mountain as flows down 20 times and then enters the southern sea. By the side of the lake is a rock palace of the Devas. Here Avalokitesvara, in coming and going, takes his abode. Those who strongly desire to see this Bodhisattva do not regard their lives, but, crossing the water, fording the streams, climb the mountain forgetful of its difficulties and dangers. Of those who make the attempt, there are very few who reach the summit. But even of those who dwell below the mountain, if they earnestly pray and beg to behold the God, sometimes he appears as Tsidzaitiin, Isvaradeva, sometimes under the form of a yogi, a Pansukta. He addresses them with benevolent words and then they obtain their wishes according to their desires. Going northeast from this mountain, on the border of the sea, is a town. This is the place from which they start for the southern sea and the country of Sankialo, Ceylon. It is said commonly by the people that embarking from this port, and going southeast about 3000 li we come to the country of Simhala. From the above account of Xuanzang, and also as mentioned by Tarnatha, the following points seem to appear important. The journey to Potalka was hazardous, and even a guide for travelling had to be used, and very few people attempted to reach the hill. On the top of the mountain, there was a lake of clear water. By the side of the lake, there was a rock palace of Devas. Avalokitesvara was taking his abode here. Sometimes he appeared before his devotees in the form of Yogi or Isvaradeva. Even now we find that Tirupati has got a clear water lake and the journey is hazardous. Potalka was being Hinduized. Commenting on this account, Sri L.M. Joshi observes, the Potalka mountain in this country was the favorite resort of Avalokitesvara, who still appeared before his devotees in the guise of Pasupta Tirthika or as Maheswar. This last passage seems to indicate that Avalokita, who has many attributes of Siva, was now in the process of being converted into Hindu god Siva. We could like to suggest that this Potalka as described by Xuanzang can be identified with the present-day Tirupati hill, and we can presume that at the time of Xuanzang the Buddhist influence was declining and the shrine was in the process of being Hinduist. Mere presence of an abundance of Tara images is not enough to identify Potalka. It must be shown that the Avalokitesvara was in fact being converted to Hindu god, the fact clearly mentioned by Xuanzang. The search for Potalka has to be among the Buddhist shrines converted to Brahmanic use. It is worthy to note that the earlier name of Vengadam was Pullikungram, i.e. the hill of Chieftain Pulli. This is mentioned in poems of Mamulanur, the most important of the Sangam poets. It was perhaps a more popular name among the Buddhists, as Pullis were Buddhists, and hence it was used by Xuanzang, and perhaps the name Potalka has been derived from Pullikunram. It is reasonable to presume that Pullikunram has become Piyota. Chapter 30. Conclusion. We begin with the origins of image worship, which emerged among Buddhists. The struggle between Brahmins and Buddhists was a significant factor in this development. Many Buddhist temples, such as those in Tar, Chezrala, Aihole, Undavli, and Ellora, were taken over for Brahmanic use. The method often employed in these temples was the chiseling out of Buddhist images. This takeover was not limited to physical temples. The Puranas played a role in claiming Buddhist places and retaining them under Brahmanic control. Scholars have provided evidence that several well-known temples, including Jagannatha of Puri, Vitthala of Pandharpur, Lord Ayyappa of Sabrimala in Kerala, Draksharama, and Srisailam in Andhra, were once Buddhist temples. The image of the Lord at Tirumalai is a point of contention. The traditional story and the Brahmanic explanation for the absence of weapons on the image cleverly use the concept of self-manifestation of Murthi to obscure scientific historical inquiry. The nature of the image of the Lord has always been a disputed matter. In the 11th or 12th century AD, there was a court dispute over the claims of Shaivas and Vaishnavas. It was Ramanuj who managed to place weapons in the hands of the Murthi. The practice of tonsure at Tirupati is unique. Here, not only men but also women, married as well as unmarried, undergo tonsure. This practice, which is ancient in this temple, is contrary to Hindu Shastras. It is not a method of Vishnu worship, and it has no relation with Vaishnavism. It is a remnant of Buddhist practices. The Ratha Yatra is a main part of Brahmotsavam. The Ratha Yatra in old records of Hindus starts much later, whereas it was a Buddhist practice in olden days and was seen by Fahe. The water from wells in the temple was not used until Ramanuj's time. The construction of the temple was pre-Ramanujan. The Garbhagriham and Snapna Mantapam were later made into double-walled structures. The great renovation of the temple was done with the intention of making the temple agree with agamic rules. This exploration sheds light on the complex history of religious transformation and the usurping of Buddhist temples for Brahmanic use. It provides a deeper understanding of the historical and religious dynamics that have shaped the religious landscape of India. We begin with the assertion that Tirupati is Potalka, the birthplace of Tantrika Buddhism in South India. The description of Potalka by Huenzang aligns with the physical features of Tirumalai, suggesting that Tirumalai could have been Huenzang's Potalka. The image of Lord Venkateswara was not sculptured by the artist as an image of Vishnu, but that of Avalokiteswara, sometime in the reign of Alvars, between the 3rd and 5th century AD. The hands of the Murthi were not holding the Sankha and or Chakra. These were placed in the hands of the Murthi at a later date, likely during the times of Ramanuj. The process of conversion of Avalokiteswara to Vishnu can be traced as follows. A proxy image of Lord of Tiruvengadam was set up in the plains. People were told that their god is now conveniently available without undertaking the hazardous journey to the hill. The next step was to put another Murthi specially meant for conversion of the people to Vaishnavism. At least in earlier stages, the people who got converted, the devotees of the Lord on the hill, were Buddhists. Subsequently, after all conversions were accomplished, the Vaishnavite Brahmins decided to put a new silver image on the hill and transfer all the attention from the proxy image to the image on the hill. By this time, the idea of Buddha being the avatara of Vishnu took root in the minds of people and they started worshipping the Lord on the Vengadam hill with the belief in the Buddha as the avatara of Vishnu. The great Ramanuj comes on the scene. He gives the weapons to the Lord. And the conversion becomes complete. Even then the temple does not conform with the Vaishnav agamas, and hence great renovation was done by Veera Narasimha in the 13th century. Now the outer walls are put round old walls, thus concealing the old features. The pillars are changed from circular to square, and Vaishnav bas-reliefs now appear on them. Traditions die very hard. In spite of being converted to Vaishnavism, the devotees do not give up the practice of tonsure, and it continues till today. People consider the deity as their Kuldevta. The reason seems to be the spread of Kalabhras, who spread all over South India and convulsed the big kingdoms, and during this process the devotees of Lord on the hill spread all over and continued to worship him as Kuldevta. Thus the Buddhist deity is first Vaishnavized mainly due to activities of Shudra saint poets, and Prabandhams are sung. Later Brahmans came in and Sanskritized the scene, and now the Lord is Brahmanized, in which form we worship him today. This exploration sheds light on the complex history of religious transformation and the usurping of Buddhist temples for Brahmanic use. It provides a deeper understanding of the historical and religious dynamics that have shaped the religious landscape of India.